So welcome to our webinar, which is titled A Dialogue Between Activists from Social Movements about the World Social Forum, where we will discuss why and how do social movements participate in the World Social Forum. So before we start, just over to Mike, who is my co-moderator. My name is Meena Menon. We are both from Forum Connect, about which I will tell you more just now. But Mike, if you could just start, give us the technical lowdown, and then we can go ahead.
Great, thanks, Meena. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Davies. I am part of Forum Connect, and I'm from Zimbabwe, from Harare in Zimbabwe. I will be attending to some of the technical issues for the European language speakers. And it's my unfortunate duty to insist on a few housekeeping rules. This is so that the meeting will run smoothly. Firstly, we insist that you use a headset. It is essential. You might think we can hear you clearly, but it's for the interpreters. They need to hear you clearly. All our interpreters today are volunteers that are giving their time because they believe in the cause that we are fighting for, that of a better alternative world. Please respect them for their commitment for doing this. Speak slowly, speak clearly, and be aware if interpreters are having problems and respond quickly. Make sure, if you can, that you turn off your video in between if you're not speaking. This reduces bandwidth for everybody, but it also makes for a clearer recording and broadcast of today's session. That's really all the housekeeping that we need to be serious about. I'm afraid if people do insist on talking without headphones and they are not being heard, I will mute them. That's my power. With that, thanks very much. I hope we have an enjoyable meeting. Back to you, Meena.
Thank you, Mike. Mike didn't introduce himself. He is part of the International Alliance of Inhabitants. He's a housing activist, and he's also part of our small group, which organizes Forum Connect. So Forum Connect, a little bit about Forum Connect. Forum Connect is a self-organized working group which has been established to systematize information regarding the World Social Forum in a didactic process that will benefit all of us. Our objective is to improve outreach about the Social Forum, especially in Asia and Africa, to understand the history of the Social Forum, its relevance to our own experience and our struggles. Our goal is to develop a body of knowledge through Forum Connect, dialogue sessions which will help people to understand the Social Forum better and to inform our collective participation in it. So that very briefly is what Forum Connect is about. So here we are organizing this webinar as part of the very first virtual World Social Forum. So for those who are relatively new here, and a large number of people who are on this in this webinar today are not very familiar. They might have attended our first session about the World Social Forum, but just a little bit about the World Social Forum. It is an international gathering of social movements, activists, which was begun in 2001 in Brazil as a counter dialogue to the World Economic Forum, which is held in January every year in Davos, Switzerland. It is a unique event where literally millions of people have participated over the years from all over the world. Its slogan, "Another world is possible," is extremely popular, used everywhere, even, I'm told, in marketing. So it is an extremely popular watchword. So organizations and movements have used the space to discuss, to strategize, to build campaigns, to engage in actions, and also build networks to advance their work. So the Social Forum has been that to a lot of organizations, to thousands of organizations all over the world. The social forum, because of COVID, is for the first time. It was supposed to be held in Mexico, but that has been postponed. And this is a virtual forum, which is being held for the first time. So more about that later. You can ask I'm sure the speakers will also discuss their own participation and the social forum. My name is Meena Menon. I'm a trade union activist. I am working president of a network called the Working People's Charter, which works with informal sector workers in India. So I have been actively engaged in building the social forum in 2004 in Mumbai. And I was also active in the International Council of the World Social Forum at that time. So I've already told you about Mike Davies. And now very briefly about the speakers. Before we start, I will just tell you who the speakers are. And I will introduce them in order of appearance before they speak. But the speakers are Christophe Aguiton from France, Faeza Meyer from South Africa, Hanni Serag from Egypt, Monica Novillo from Bolivia, Paul Divakar from India, and Sergio Bassoli from Italy. So I will introduce the speakers more in detail when they come on. The speakers have 6 minutes each. Questions from the participants can be sent to the chat box or in the Q&A or through whichever channel you are watching this, and we will pass them on to the speakers. Sorry that we cannot have more participation. It's the time that we have, just 2 hours, is also a constraint. But please do ask your questions, and we will give the speakers another 3 minutes after they are done to respond to the questions. So we will start with Christophe. Christophe has been involved in trade unions and the Alter Global movement, the anti-globalization movement since the 90s. And he's one of the founders of Attack France, which is a French movement for social and environmental justice. He spent many years working in the International Council of the Social Forum representing Attack. He has been active in the climate justice mobilization in Copenhagen and Paris. He was very active in organizing the Social Movements Assembly in the earliest forums. Over to you, Christophe. You have 6 minutes.
Thanks a lot, Meena, and I'm very happy to be with all of you. It's really a pleasure to see so many people interested by the social forum and the involvement of the social movement in the forum. To understand why the forum was so important, we have to come 20 years ago, in the beginning of this century, and we had 2 important events who are at the roots of the existence of the World Social Forum. The first one is the fact that we entered in the 80s and the 90s in a phase of globalization, which was new for the 20th century, was mainly a century where the nation states were divided and separated. In the 80s and 90s, we knew the reform of Reagan and Thatcher, and then after the collapse of the USSR, the globalization became a sort of obligation for the total planet, or almost the total planet. That was the first element. The second element is the fact that a series of institutions were absolutely key in the development of this globalization, this economic and neoliberal globalization. I'm thinking, of course, that the IMF and the World Bank was so important to impose adjustment plan in Africa, in Asia, or in Latin America. I'm thinking that the WTO was created in 95 and was really the main tool to open the market at worldwide level. I'm also thinking at the G7, which was a sort of directory of the world where the big powers impose its power all over the world, and also Davos, the World Economic Forum, which was the ideological tool, if you want, of this neoliberal globalization. And the WSF was created as a sort of counterpart, opposition to the WEF, to the World Economic Forum, and we named the WSF the World Social Forum as opposition to the World Economic Forum. The importance of the WSF at the beginning and for all this period was to change the political culture of the movement. In the past, in the 20th century, the hierarchy was the norm in most of the social movement. Hierarchy between class, the working class was seen as the only class able to change the situation and to go to socialism, forgetting women, farmers, intellectuals, and a lot of other social actors. And inside the working class, the political party were seen as the normal leadership of the working class, and unions were seen as a sort of secondary role. In the WSF, and that it's really the new political culture, and this political culture was based on the horizontality, meaning that the movement were seen as important as the others. The working class was not seen as more important than the farmers or the feminist movement or the youth movement. And the parties were not allowed to avoid to re-establish inside the WSF, inside the World Social Forum, the hierarchy which existed in the past in the social movement. The second thing important at this time with this new political culture is the fact that the social forum was based on organization. I was there as attack. Meena was there as focus on the global south at this time. Pierre Georges was there as Caritas, and so on and so on. We were not individuals, we were representatives of organization. And that was the base of the WSF. Today, a lot, or more precisely in the previous years, two elements change a lot. The first element is the fact that the multilateralism of the 90s disappeared. If you look at the US and Trump, maybe the things could change with Biden, but it was clear that for Trump, all those multilateral institutions means nothing. And he quit the Paris Agreement on Climate, he quit the Health World Organization, and multilateralism is globally on a stand today, doesn't work anymore. If you look at the WTO, this institution is totally paralyzed. And that creates also a problem for us, the social movement, because 2 years ago, the fact to have a common enemy, Davos, the G7, the WTO, the IMF, helped us to gather and to have this big event like Genoa in Italy in 2001, Hong Kong against the WTO, Cancun against the WTO, and so on and so on. The lack of international institution weakens our capacity to maintain an internationalist activity. The second difficulty we have in the recent period is the fact that the organizations are more weak than they were before. And if you look at all the new social movement, I'm thinking, of course, at the Occupy Wall Street movement, at the Arab Spring 10 years ago, but more recently, if you look at 2019, before the COVID, we had all over the planet huge social movement in Chile, in Latin America, in the US, in Africa, with Sudan, with Algeria, in Asia, I am thinking at Hong Kong, and a lot of other movements. But those movements were based for most of them, not in organization, but in individuals. This presence and this importance of the individuals played a good role in the sense of that they were able to open the movement to a lot of citizens who were able to go by themselves without being member of a union or organization, an NGO or whatever. But at the same time, it's much more complicated to organize a forum or a common activity when you don't have movement to link, but when you are based on individuals. And I finish to respect the 6 minutes we all have by telling that today, in 2020, one thing changed the world, which is this COVID pandemic. And the emergence of this worldwide disease, with all the drama we know in all our countries, obliged everyone to think at international level. We need to know what happened in the different continents, why the pandemic was more controlled in New Zealand, Australia, Vietnam, Taipei, or Hong Kong, or China, than in Europe and in the US, for example. What to do at the end of the pandemic? Do we want to come back to the world we knew 10 years ago? I don't think so, because the pandemic showed us as well that the correlation between human and nature has to be different. And there are a lot of things we have to think at, the necessity of the care. During this pandemic, the first thing we thought is the people we are close to, our family, our friends, our colleagues, the people we like, and how to have a society based on the care, based on a different relationship between human and nature. All those events and all those realities are, I think, well known all over the world. And one of the interests of forum like the WSF or other space who could exist today is to help to understand more first what happened, but also to try to have together alternative to the world we knew in the last 10, 20 years, using the pandemic, if you want, as a tipping point to build another world. That's what I wanted to say as an introduction, and thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Christophe, and thank you for respecting the time as well. You're quite within your time. And if you have questions for Christophe, because he made a number of very interesting points, I won't go over them again. Please do put your questions in the question box or in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and send it to us so that we can send it over to Christophe. You can put it there and he can see it. If possible, put in the names of the speaker to whom you will be addressing your question. Next, we have Faeza Meyer. Faeza is a community-based activist and organizer. She has been involved in campaigns for housing, water, education, health, and women's rights in Cape Town in South Africa since 2011. She is currently an organizer, facilitator for the African Water Commons Collective, actively involved in the Western Cape Water Caucus and the Fight Inequality Alliance. She is from South Africa, as I said, and over to you, Faeza.
Greetings to everyone. Thank you for having me in this space. I feel very honored. I'm always very nervous about these kind of things, but I'm going to do my utmost best today. So I'm from South Africa. I'm from Cape Town. I just wanted to give a bit of background around Cape Town and what's happening here at the moment. Cape Town, as we all know, is the most unequal city in the world, which means the gap between the rich and the poor is very big and it's continuing to grow. And then there's the conditions of the working class. The working class and poor people are living in very bad housing conditions, living in informal settlements, in backyards, in very tiny, badly built RDP social housing, in temporary location areas and in rental stock. In this country, in the city that I'm living in, water is being privatized through water management devices, also known as weapons of mass destruction. Over 11 million people here in South Africa is unemployed at the moment, where there's also talks at the moment of tax increases, and we know what happens when taxes are increased. They are saying that it's for the vaccine, but we all know when taxes are increased, it's the poor and the working class that suffers or bears the brunt at the end of the day. So COVID-19 has highlighted the failures of government's neoliberal policies and their cost recovery attempts. As an example, and this is just a small one, water is, if you cannot pay your water, your arrears is being deducted from your electricity purchases. So you get 50% of your electricity and the other 50% goes to your water arrears, which you obviously haven't given permission to, because if you can't pay your water, you're already struggling with electricity as well. The World Social Forum, in our view, as an organization who's trying to connect to the larger movement, is an alternative to the World Economic Forum. And we think that at this stage, it is exactly what we should be doing. We should be creating alternatives from the ground up. We have all of these issues going on around us, and there doesn't seem to be alternatives for us. And it's up to us to be creating these alternatives. And I think that's what the World Social Forum is doing. So I also want to talk a little bit about my experience of being part of different working class social movements. I think the first thing I want to say is that it's hard to be a woman in leadership, especially when it comes to social movements. You know, patriarchy is very much alive and around us, and as much as we learn, there's also so much that we need to unlearn. Some women are not even aware that patriarchy is taking place. That's how it's become normal within our organization. So that's probably a whole day conversation. Currently, there are issues of identity politics within our community and communities and organizations. People are divided by race. Some identify as colored, some identify as Black. Some so-called colored people refuse to identify that they are Black. We are also divided by youth and adults. And then even religiously, religion plays a huge role in how we are being divided. But this is all because we are fighting about the crumbs. We are all fighting for the crumbs. This is also the nature of neoliberal capitalism, and it puts profit before people, and it individualizes the struggle. No one can afford to share anymore. We are fighting in our own corners, and we are all doing great work. And it's for the same reason, yet we are still doing it on our own. Those who struggle for decent housing also struggle for decent jobs. They also struggle for equal quality healthcare, also for decent education for the children. So it's not different. We are not separate people. We are just being organized in different directions. We need to unite our struggles because we have the same enemy. We need to work together as social movements and trade unions, because workers live in the above mentioned housing types, and they are also struggling with us because they are us. Today I can be a worker, tomorrow I can be unemployed. We need to build political consciousness and unity amongst the working class through campaigns based on the issues. It's important that the class understands why these issues exist, why the lack of housing delivery, why the move from building houses to offering only service sites, because that's what's happening in Cape Town or in South Africa at the moment. Our government has stopped building social housing because they said that they have rectified the mistakes of apartheid. All those under the age of 40 no longer qualifies for housing because we are considered youth. And they say the youth wasn't affected by apartheid. We know this is not true. The other thing is women are the most affected by the lack of service delivery. And this is our experience from the work that we are doing in our communities. They are the cooks, they are the cleaners, the carers, etc. I will make 3 examples of what I'm talking about. 3 stories that we've written up in the recent period, because we go around and we do, for this specific week, in solidarity with comrades globally, we have been doing door-to-door leafleteering. We have been picketing on corners, of course, social distancing. We have been doing interviews. And here's 3 of the interviews to just kind of prove what I'm saying. So this is 3 pensioners. One has a bill of 350,000 for water. This is due to a burst pipe, and she's forced to make arrangements or get evicted, and she has to pay. The other one is also a pension, number 2. She scratches ice out of a freezer at night to take chronic medication because she doesn't have enough water in the house. On the property is a water management device that provides only 350 liters of water per property. Yeah, and so she doesn't have enough water. She needs to scratch the ice out of the freezer so that she can take a chronic medication. The other one catches water in the drain from a leaking pipe to drink, because the city of Cape Town has cut the water before COVID, and she's been without water since. We've been struggling to get access for her and for the other 2 women, with many others, but we've gotten no response from the city. In fact, they continue to disconnect people's water. The other very, I think, scary thing is that water is now on the stock market. And so what does that mean for us? It just puts profit before people, and it gives the rich and big companies the right to hoard, water, buy it up now and then store it and keep it for later, so that when it's needed, because they know what they're doing with climate change, they know that we are going to run out of water. So they want to have it in their control, so that when time comes, they can sell it to us. And we must be aware of that. The challenges of organizing during COVID, I think the reality is that the majority of the working class is at the moment is unemployed. Like I mentioned, 11 million people in South Africa is unemployed. And all of these activities that we are doing, the actions and at the moment is happening online. And people don't have access to phones. Some don't have smartphones. They don't have data, they don't have electricity, they don't have any of these resources so that they can participate. So automatically we're excluding a huge part of the constituency that needs to be part of these kind of conversations. Okay, I think the other thing just to add to that is that the other issues in communities is that we don't have PPEs, we don't have the sanitizers, the masks, or the soap, or the water to wash our hands to be able to do this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Faeza. It was lovely to hear from you. And right on, that bit about patriarchy, hold on to that, hold that thought, we are with you. Patriarchy within the movements, yes. So that's Faeza. And now we have Hanni Serag, who is a physician, a public health researcher. We have been discussing COVID. He has been coordinator of the People's Health Movement, which has played a big role in the analysis and the campaign on various aspects of COVID, including the vaccine, for instance. So PHM, that is the People's Health Movement, is a global network of civil society organizations, academic institutes, and health activists. And as director of health policy and systems program of the Association of Health and Environmental Development, a leading civil society organization in Egypt, Hanni has been active in that as well. Over to you, Hanni, 6 minutes.
Two issues, just want to talk about them very quickly and to try to say that the world social movement is needed more than ever in these days. And it's not only to get people together, but to provide very needed solidarity, to strive for common activism and coordinated activism, also to mobilize communities across the world and to strategize for common actions. And I have two things to share. One of them is related to the Arab Spring, which after Arab Spring starting in 2011, the countries that were participating in this are two types right now, with exception of Tunisia a little bit. Some of them went into deep political conflict, wars, and nobody knows when this is going to change. And the second type is very well established and consolidated leaderships, military leaderships. And again, nobody knows when this can change. The example of Egypt as an example, the current regime is way worse than what we experienced before. The level of oppression, the level of dictatorships never been seen in Egypt before, at least in my entire life. So we have 60,000 political prisoners at the moment, and they are not from one stream. So the whole talk about fundamentalism or Muslim Brothers is really rubbish talk. Everybody from the opposition can be in prison immediately, writing on Facebook or even opposing the regime through political parties channels is an acquisition. and can lead to imprisonment immediately. There are several people who are in the prison right now for more than 2 years without trials. So the problem is not the regime in Egypt. The problem is the huge support from outside to this regime. So in the beginning, there was some hesitation from European community specifically, and some from the US to support this dictatorship. Now they are blind. They are just supporting the regime as is, because the regime continued to provide lots of compromise to get the legitimacy from the international community. In addition to that, what's going on in the Middle East right now is to sell everything to the Zionists. So Israel is being prepared right now to be a very strong economic power in the Middle East. Right now, we hear a lot about the Abraham agreements. It started with Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, and go on. And they call it peace. And there never been conflict, for example, between Emirates and Israel. So it's not peace. It's actually right now is to forget completely Palestine. So Palestinians are not considered in these agreements completely. And Israel is being seen as the incoming economic power in the region. And when we talk about Israel, we're not talking about a real estate, we're talking about Zionism, we're talking about racism, and so on. This is the first point. So the neoliberal capitalism and neoliberalism decided to get back to support the dictatorships in the Middle East, because it's much better to have controlled dictatorships in the Middle East and to have controlled conflicts and wars. This will rationalize the domination from the big powers more than getting democracy. Democracy in the Middle East is very, very dangerous for the global neoliberalism, especially with respect to Israel. If there is any kind of democracy in the Middle East, Israel will not continue as it is right now. And let me put it this way. The second point is related to the vaccine distribution. And all of us have been witnessing the distribution of the vaccine, which is associated with incredible inequities. And this is not only related to the shortage of production or the high level of demand. This is a result. This is not the cause. The real causes behind that is the research and innovation modes we are doing, and the mode of production, the broken global governance in health, in addition to the broken trade-related intellectual property right. So these are the main causes. And these kind of inequities will continue unless we change the broken governance for health. So it's bigger than just who's producing it, who's paying for it. Everybody's paying for it. So you will find that, for example, the production of the vaccine, especially one of them in the US, has been publicly funded. So the company did not make the research that's needed. And there are lots of things to talk about them when it comes to intellectual property right and this broken system. Accordingly, just to respect the time, that these examples for me are very important to rationalize the importance of the global solidarity, working together, not just for global events or to come together during the World Social Forum, but between them, and to connect people together. In the Middle East, for example, we need huge level 4 activism. People who are in Tahrir Square as natural leaders during the revolution in 2011, they are either in prison or outside the country. That's it. There is no, or they are silent. There is no other choice people can do. So we need the global solidarity. We need to come together and work on the structural determinants more than just solving the results of them. I will stop here and thank you very much for organizing that.
That was a very topical and very important point that you made. And it also raises the issue, perhaps I will ask you that question, what kind of international solidarity would you think would be useful? But that's a question for you for later. And now I am going to call Sergio because he has to leave, unfortunately. So if it is okay with the other speakers, I will call Sergio Bassoli next. Is that okay, Paul? Because Paul also had some issues. Is it okay if I call Sergio, or Paul, do you have to leave now? Paul?
Go ahead. I can wait for another 20 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. So thank you for that. And now I will call Sergio. Sergio Bassoli is a trade unionist. He is involved with the CGIL, a trade union in Italy. He is a director of Nexus, CGIL, Emilia Romagna. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The general director of Progetto Sviluppo, International Institute of CGIL. Since 2010, he is in charge of relations with Latin America, MENA region, peace, social movements, and migrants for CGIL International Department. He was the co-founder and coordinator of the Italian NGOs platform on the Middle East. And he is coordinator of the Italian Network for Peace and a member of the International Council of the World Social Forum. Over to Sergio. Welcome. You have 6 minutes, Sergio.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, and Meena and Paul for accepting all the change of order in our intervention. But I have to leave for another meeting on the migrant issue always in this World Social Forum. So very thanks for this initiative, and I'm really happy and proud to be here with you because it's important to make a sort of evaluation or to share our feeling regarding the World Social Forum process. Now, 20 years are enough for making a brief evaluation. And at the end of the day, I think I wish to share with you that the forum initiative was and is very important, but is not enough. I think we need to make a step forward from a forum to actions. I mean, we see that our enemy, how somebody said before, or the neoliberalism, of the big powers of the financial system, the transnationals, the big powers, they think to have to be the owner of all the planet, are working, producing inequalities, and they are destroying the planet, and they are producing and reproducing wars. So it's not enough to gather in a forum or in a thematic forum or in a global forum, but our need, our priority now is to understand how we can build a strong alliance of with the unity of the different movement, workers, unemployed people, indigenous people, women, youngsters, etc., together, sharing a common goal to change this narrative. It's not enough to say another world is possible. We need to build proposals, suitable proposals at local level, national level, and at international level. Without our action plan, without to be proactive, it will be really, really difficult to change something concretely. People is still and more suffering. So this is my simple message. And I'm representing here the trade union movement. We are working, coming back, I can say, we are coming back in the World Social Forum in this edition, virtual edition, with this aim to rethink our alliance. We have to understand why, from the beginning, as Christophe showed very well all the history of these 20 years, why many movements, they left this dynamic. They are struggling alone, or they are not so interested to build alliances. This is a question we have to give answer. And just to finish, we are ready. We wish, as a trade unions, to have such debate. We need to find the time. We need to find the common concrete goals, because time is finished. We need to build actions. Thanks, and hoping to be able to build a new phase of a global alliance between peoples and workers and women and indigenous, etc. Thanks.
Thank you, Sergio. You are well, far less than the time that you had. But I wanted to just ask you, will you be staying with us or will you go and come back to take questions? What is your, will you be in a position to come back? No.
I try to do it because I have to make my speech in another, but I try to come back. Okay.
Oh, wonderful, because there will be questions for you, because you spoke about solidarity, and I think what's the most important thing, because I think what Christophe said, in fact, was that maybe the breakdown of the multinational institutions and the lack of a clear enemy is a problem. So you need to tell us how to build that solidarity as organized trade unions, yes? So, okay, thank you, Sergio. Now
Hello, Meena, may I just mention that Sergio is instrumental in building...
Sorry? Can't hear you. Is that Pierre?
Yeah.
Could you speak a little louder,
Yes,
Pierre? We can't hear you.
I'm just saying that... do you hear me?
Yes, now better.
Okay, so I'm just saying that Sergio is instrumental in building a coalition of trade unions for a call for an extraordinary mobilization towards May and the Singapore World Economic Forum. So this is in the format of an initiative, which is a new way of participation, showing the type of actions that WSF participants are ready to do together with a series of organizations, a goal, and some action dates. Okay.
Okay, but thank you for that, Pierre. Maybe at the end again, you can say that, and this is, we can, maybe you have shared a link here. Is that where we can get in touch with this mobilization?
Yes.
So everybody,
there is
a link there that has been provided by Pierre. Please take that down if you would like to get in touch for the mobilizations in Singapore. More information will be available there. So now let's move on. Now we have the speaker after, who is Paul, because Paul had said that he had some time constraints as well. Paul Divakar is an advocate for Dalit rights. He's an expert on economic rights and a human rights defender on inclusion. and issues around untouchability and atrocities, which are a serious and very central issue in India and a large part of and South Asia, and perhaps further as well. He is co-chair of the Global Call to Action Against Poverty, that's GCAP. He's one of the founding members of the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights, that is NCDHR, and currently he is General Secretary of the NCDHR for Global Networks and for Advocacy. He is convener of the Global Forum on Discrimination Based on Work and Descent, that is birth, a platform collectively emerged with large numbers of marginalized peoples from all over the world. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Meena. Thank you for this space in this very interesting webinar. Let me come straight to the point. We had a lot of discussion way back in 2001 whether to participate in this or not. You may also recall that that was the time that the World Conference against Racism in Durban was taking place. It was just before that. So we were caught between how much of energy that we need to put in. And finally, we managed to go, and we felt that this is a forum which has a future. What do I mean by that? I mean, there is, several of the forums have very constricting space, especially for issues which are not very sexy, which are not very, with communities which are very macho, in their mobilization or in their articulation. Whereas many of the communities that we represented are those who have been, for no fault of theirs, because of their birth, had been pushed into a real form of not only spatial, but all forms of exclusion. And their contribution has been negated. And whenever they challenge these, there have been extreme forms of violence against them. And I'm not talking only about Dalits. Dalits, I think many of us over the period of time have come to understand a little of communities which are affected by the concept called purity pollution, and which is very much part of the South Asian ethos. But you have communities in Japan called Burakumin, in Europe, right from Ireland to Eastern Europe, even Turkey. You have communities which are known as Roma, Gypsy, Travelers, Manush, and Sinti, several other names. They are criminalized. They have been excluded. You have in Africa who are traditionally pushed into forms of slavery and trafficking, and even much before the transatlantic slave trade has started, these communities have been there. And it's not a binary of a race, not black and white, but from their own communities, like you have in India, who have been pushed into forms of menial and manual labor. And they are also segregated, the same color, same culture, same language, but excluded. And they are also affected by it's intergenerational, so by descent. Now, and also in Brazil, you have communities like Quilombola communities who have all been pushed into slave and then have liberated themselves, and they are still facing forms of exclusion. And we, for the last 15 years, we've been trying to gather ourselves and identify, because we don't, in one sense, are not recognized as a racial minority, though in some places they do. And in other places, we are also not regarded as the indigenous community. So we're not racial minorities, we're not indigenous, and of course, not the other identities. So this is being, we call ourselves communities affected by discrimination based on work, forced labor, and menial and trafficking and of sorts, and intergenerational by descent. And so we have been coming together to find a space, both politically as well as as a social movement, to see how these the structures need to be dismantled, and therefore ensure that we get over the barriers to realize the potential that all of us believe that we have, even though the contribution is very much. And when Faeza was talking about the communities in South Africa, whether it's water, whether it's land, whether it is wages, whether it is access to entitlements, whether it is access to the state resources, the budgets, federal and state budgets, among all these institutions, these communities have been excluded. Both the left movement on the one hand, and of course the right movements definitely have no space. They have somehow been glossed over, even though they constitute a majority of the working force. So with these intentions of first gathering ourselves, and also secondly to pitch our demands, whether it's an economic in the political domain, whether it is also even on the aspects of gender, where you see further layers of discrimination of the communities, the women who are from these communities face. We felt that needs a special intentional deliberation, which needs to be gathered as a movement. And we found that World Social Forum, before Mumbai, we had Asia Social Forum. We had invited people from the Asian subcontinent to take place, to contribute. And also in the World Social Forum Mumbai, many of these communities had participated, and they had given. So in that sense, we feel that World Social Forum does have a space. Somehow, we didn't have the kind of time and spatial resources to influence the governance of the World Social Forum for various reasons. And I think if we are constituting ourselves, probably it will be good to see what are the ways in which several communities which have been either negated or continuously being neglected, to ensure that their participation and also their contribution to be not just recognized, but also encouraged, to see that they strengthen a global movement. Most of the time, we are concerned, as you rightly can understand, of ensuring that we have policy frameworks. So a lot of our energy goes into looking at what policies are needed and how those policies need to be implemented. So because the World Social Forum, to a large extent, is most an inter-movement or inter-social movements, we tend to have lesser resources to be able to actively engage with the World Social Forum. I think hopefully in the time to come, we should be able to see how we can also contribute as well as demand resources from this very important forum for us to take forward. So I think this is a conversation we need to have and ensure that we connect together.
Thank you. Thank you, Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. You have given us a very positive message. And now we have Monica. We move on to Monica, sorry. Monica Novillo is a Bolivian social communicator and popular educator in training processes on gender, leadership, citizenship, political advocacy, and women's rights. She is executive director of the Women's Coordination and General Coordination of REPAM, REPAM, Regional Feminist Network, and she locates her actions especially in the education of women and young adults from the perspective of feminist popular education. Over to you, Monica.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, depende para todos en qué horario están. Voy a pedir que puedan cambiar sus audífonos al español para poder escucharme. Yo voy a aprovechar esta oportunidad de que tenemos traducción, pero también saludar desde América Latina, también una región que está enfrentando varias de las situaciones que ya se han compartido previamente. Como se me ha presentado, vengo de dos movimientos sociales, uno muy importante que es el movimiento feminista, un movimiento plural, diverso, internacionalista y que ha demostrado en los últimos años ser uno de los movimientos más fuertes a nivel mundial porque ha logrado articular una gran movilización de mujeres en torno a ciertas demandas que compartimos las mujeres en el mundo. Pero las mujeres no somos homogéneas, no somos un sujeto homogéneo, sino más bien que llevamos una serie de características que hacen a nuestra identidad étnica, racial, de clase, de orientación sexual, y nuestra identidad genérica, nuestra edad, y vivimos situaciones diferentes que tienen que ser también abordadas de manera diferente. Y el segundo movimiento del que vengo es justamente el movimiento de educadores populares en América Latina y particularmente el movimiento de educación popular feminista, que aboga justamente por una educación laica, una educación de calidad, una educación gratuita, inclusiva, no sexista y a lo largo de la vida. Entonces, bueno, esto implica reconocer particularmente en un contexto de COVID que el acceso de las mujeres a la educación se ha visto comprometido, en sentido de que es uno de los primeros servicios que ha sido cortado, el acceso a la educación. En el caso boliviano particularmente, el año escolar fue clausurado, negándole a millones de niñas y niños el derecho a la educación, pero esto también tiene impactos diferenciados en términos de cómo viven las mujeres, dependiendo nuevamente de dónde viven, si viven en área rural o en área urbana, de su edad y de sus condiciones étnicas o raciales. Y esto debe ser de particular importancia. Yo quiero celebrar este diálogo entre movimientos que además es una práctica histórica en el Foro Social Mundial y en el que se han ido adscribiendo también las diferentes expresiones del movimiento feminista que aporta a este espacio, a este encuentro tan plural y diverso como es el Foro Social Mundial. Y en esa perspectiva, lo celebro porque deja de ser más bien se convierte en un espacio de intercambio para los movimientos sociales y deja de ser una visión de silo aislada de cada movimiento que tiende a mirarse a sí mismo sin intercambiar. Y en el movimiento feminista se han dado una serie de iniciativas para contar con estos espacios en los que los diferentes movimientos sociales compartimos esta visión de transformación del mundo. Y compartimos nuestras visiones también desde la visión de luchas emancipatorias que tenemos los movimientos. Y en el caso particular de los feminismos, que estamos cuestionando las diferentes exclusiones y desafiamos también las estructuras opresivas que se generan, y no solamente las de género, sino las exclusiones por raza, por clase, por orientación sexual, por identidad de género y también, por supuesto, el grupo etario al que pertenecemos. Entonces, la lucha de los feminismos se convierte en una lucha que se reconoce como anticapitalista, antipatriarcal, como nos planteaba también alguien que me antecedía. El patriarcado suele estar también introduciéndose en los movimientos sociales y al mismo tiempo reproduciendo ciertas exclusiones a las mujeres. Siendo un movimiento anticapitalista, antirracista, antipatriarcal, entonces buscamos estos espacios para dialogar con otros movimientos. Y estos diálogos nos permiten de alguna manera encontrarnos para crear alianzas, para una acción política conjunta. Parte de lo que nos planteaba Sergio es probablemente muchos movimientos que se han acercado al Foro Social Mundial buscan encontrar en este espacio un espacio donde podamos construir alianzas sostenibles y que no sean coyunturales y puntuales, y que nos permitan avanzar no solamente revisando nuestras estrategias conjuntas, sino también construir agendas conjuntas, colectivas, justamente para enfrentar las desigualdades estructurales que vamos observando desde los diferentes movimientos. Nos permiten también visibilizar un conjunto de diversidades, de movimientos en los que también las mujeres son parte y donde el movimiento feminista también tiene una acción y una actuación concreta. Por ejemplo, en los sindicatos de trabajadores, el movimiento feminista también está tomando potencia en diferentes regiones y países. Y en ese marco, entonces, el Foro Social Mundial se convierte en una plataforma y en un espacio prioritario para encontrar estas alianzas más sostenibles. Reconocernos tan diferentes como somos en el marco de la pluralidad y la diversidad para fortalecer una construcción de una democracia mucho más radical, que no hable solamente del espacio público, sino también del espacio privado, que es parte de las demandas que tenemos en el movimiento feminista. Y creo que una demanda constante de las feministas al interior del Foro Social Mundial en diversos espacios y así diversas como somos, es justamente la inclusión de las demandas del movimiento feminista en los otros movimientos. Al mismo tiempo, también nuestra demanda de que las demandas de las feministas en términos de transformación de una sociedad hacia una sociedad mucho más justa, también recoja la diversidad y lo que nosotras llamamos la interseccionalidad. Y creo que un elemento fundamental para reflexionar es cómo se articula la solidaridad entre los movimientos como una respuesta permanente, y es parte de lo que nos planteaban hace un momento, que la solidaridad es una de las herramientas de lucha más fuerte que tenemos los movimientos sociales para seguir resistiendo. Entonces, la lucha contra el patriarcado sigue siendo una gran demanda desde los movimientos feministas que formamos parte del Foro Social Mundial. Muchas gracias.
Well, I will have to ask you, Mike, first and Kinchi, to see whether there are any questions. One question which Christophe has already got, the question that he has already. Have there been any other questions which to throw to the speakers, and are there any questions from our Chinese participants? Because I can see something written there in Chinese, so could somebody read them out? Kinchi, if you could read out the questions, the Chinese ones, or whoever. And Mike, if you could just say whether there have been any questions, if you have been monitoring that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. My question, if I can jump in, it was there seems to be a dissonance between the social movement's desire for a better world and to promote alternatives and the contestation for political power, which is the essence of real systemic change. We have to engage in that struggle for the political power to implement progressive policies. And it's a question that many of us in the social movements shy from. We tend to challenge from outside in a way to topple the system. But even if we succeeded in toppling the system, we would still have to create governance in the alternative world. And I think it's very dangerous that we do not pay enough attention to the question of power. How do we contest it? How do we get it? And how do we keep our people accountable once they get it? Very difficult question.
Felix, would you like to say something?
Thank you, gracias. Soy Félix Juan de Dios Cadena Barquín, de la Fundación Latinoamericana para el Apoyo al Saber y la Economía Solidaria de México y miembro del Grupo de Renovación del Foro Social Mundial. Muy breve, solamente como lo expresó Clara y otros de los que han intervenido, creo que sí están maduras las condiciones para que pudiéramos en este mismo foro, el día 30, salir con un acuerdo de una agenda global conjunta. Que mencionó ella del caso de las mujeres. Si el día 8 de marzo todas las organizaciones y movimientos que nos identificamos en la búsqueda de otro mundo posible, nos expresamos ese día también, pero no como solidaridad solamente hacia las mujeres, sino diciendo que la lucha de las mujeres es una de las dimensiones de la lucha global, así como ella mencionó que la lucha de los derechos de las mujeres está implicando a todos los otros mecanismos de dominación. Esto de que pudiéramos este día 30 escoger 4 o 5 días, por ejemplo el 8 de marzo, el 1 de mayo sobre el derecho al trabajo digno y la justicia económica, ya avanzaron mucho el grupo sobre la paz y el desarme de proponer también un día en que harían por la paz, el desarme, la transición ecológica, y hay 2 días más o 3 que se están madurando. No tomo el tiempo más en los días, sino en la propuesta, que sí lográramos concertarlo, porque esto tiene un efecto 3 principalmente. Pero que el foro ya no sea una serie de eventos, sino un proceso, y no solo al interior, sino al exterior. Segundo, que esta acción de ir preparando pueda ser en su propio espacio. No se trata solamente de salir a manifestarnos o de hacer denuncias, sino...
Thank you, Felix.
Bueno,
thank you,
bien.
You're out of time. Thank you. So I will over to Christophe. So you have your 3 minutes. Starts now, Christophe.
Yes, thanks. And I will try to answer to the question of Mike and your question also, Meena. About the relationship between political groups and social movements. In the WSF, we decided to not have political parties. But at the same time, to be honest, if you remember what happened at the beginning of the 2020 years ago, there was de facto an alliance between left parties and social forum. If you remember that we started the WSF in Brazil, in Porto Alegre, at this time, there was only Chavez in Venezuela who was left power, if you want. But very quickly after the first WSF, we had the victory of the Worker Party in Brazil, and then also a series of victory of the left in Bolivia, in Ecuador, in Paraguay, in Chile. And that's achieve a situation where almost all South America was led by progressist government. But at the same time, very quickly, a lot of contradiction happens. Contradiction first about the link between ecology and economical development and social issues. Most of those powers, I'm thinking at Chavez in Venezuela in particular, decided to give the priority to the social redistribution, which is good, no problem at all, but using the petrol and the oil without questioning this specific model. If you look at Venezuela, the day Chavez took the power, petrol was 90% of the exportation and the budget of the country. Today, 20 years later, it's exactly the same. there was no change at all on this relationship between petrol and the capacity of the Venezuelan government to redistribute money. And this contradiction between the ecological issues and the social issues was particularly strong, for example, in Bolivia or Ecuador, where the powers of the progressive government choose the economical development against indigenous communities in both cases, with a lot of conflict on this issue. The second difficulty was the relationship with democracy. All those powers, even if they respect the result of the election, and they were not dictature, if you want, but they had a very verticalist way to see the power. They were very based on strong leadership of the leader, the president of the republic, in most of the case, and that didn't give enough room for maneuver for the social movement. And I really believe that one of the issue we have to discuss today is what kind of politics. It's not because you claim to be from the left that you are able to resolve all those issues of verticalism, the relationship with nature, and the ecological issues. And that is not only a Latin American issue. It's also a problem, in my opinion, in Asia, in Europe, probably in Africa as well. We can see in South Africa, the ENC power and all the problem we had also of verticalism. And I think for me, the main challenge is to be able, and the social movement can be very useful to that, to have a sort of new paradigm, a new vision for the future. We cannot be like we were 20, 30, 40 years ago, thinking that the economical development is the only goal we need to prioritize and that the rest will come later. That doesn't work like that. The experience of the USSR and other so-called socialist countries showed this difficulty. For this reason, I think that the key problem today is more a sort of programmatical or doctrinal issue, which is what kind of left do we want? What kind of program do we want? And I think that it's really key. Second issue, and I will be very short to respect the limit of time.
Yes.
About the capacity of creating international mobilization is, of course, a little bit more difficult today because we don't have the common enemy we had 20 years ago. But at the same time, the Arab Spring or all the Occupy movement, or more recently in 2019, this year of rebellion and huge movement, show that people are able to move together. What we need is to have a space to have more discussion, confrontation, exchange of experience. The WSF could be one of those spaces. And through the pandemic, we are realizing that people need this kind of space. Even if we are not in the same situation than 20 years ago, I'm quite optimistic in the idea that we could have a sort of renew of the international space we really need for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christophe. Now I move on to Faeza. You have your 3 minutes to respond or to comment on the discussions that have happened here. It doesn't have to be a question directed to you, but you can respond to any of the other discussions or the other speakers, what they have said. Over to you, Faeza.
Thank you so much. Comrades, I think for me, I think for me, I want to respond to the question that was in the chat box that asked if there's is there space for internationalism in South Africa? Absolutely. I think what we are doing at the moment is connecting, locally, provincially, but we also do know that we can only, the aim is for capitalism to go, to overthrow, to tilt the pyramid, and we can only do that internationally. We cannot do that individually. I just want to respond, I think, also to what Comrade Mike raised earlier on around, political parties. I think that's a huge challenge for us in our communities. To be honest, I think people have been exploited, so many times by political parties that when we do the groundwork, when we knock on the doors, the first thing people ask is, what political party are you from? Because they're not interested anymore. So, people have lost faith in political parties. I mean, the ANC has is playing a huge role in just demoralizing people in terms of joining any kind of political party. So, yeah, I think, building the alternative, continuing to build the alternative, the masses eventually will decide what route we take. But absolutely, we have to hold hands on a global scale, or we will not be able to achieve our demands under capitalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Faeza. And now we have Hanni. Hanni, your 3 minutes. Please respond.
Yeah, thank you very much, Meena. I should say that I do not have a very direct answer. Maybe I will raise more questions, especially based on the experience in the Middle East. I think the fear from what happened in the Arab Spring, that it shows that there are ways to impose a change outside the channels that we know, the political channels through the political parties and through the mechanisms that the regime may provide for a change. In other words, Occupy, being in the street, it became a way of a change. And I think this was a huge fear for the neoliberalism because it can be exported outside. So they accepted the oppression against these movements. So right now, if you look at Egypt, for example, which the example I can talk about in a good way, nobody's able to be in the street. People will be killed immediately or put in prisons immediately. They are not going to wait to have critical mass in the streets to impose change. So what is the solution right now? So the huge support from outside, the legitimacy that the regime is getting from the big powers is enabling it to start making the oppression immediately without waiting for building any kind of critical mass for a change. So the idea here, which building solidarity, building mobilization, and try to mobilize people to get to make these changes in a very peaceful way, where it goes, how it can make change. So this became very big question right now, and this applies even on other things like the vaccine. Right now, these are the international regulations. Some people will get vaccinated. The majority of people will not, or they need just to wait. And the regulations will continue being like that. So again, the peaceful movement and try to change from the ground, how much time it needs. So it appears to me that we need not to use just the available space. I do not have a concrete answer how to create more space for the movement. I do not have that, but it sounds like just using the available space that these regimes or capitalism is going to allow is not enough. It's not enough at all. Even the use of the social media right now is not enough. It was very promising in the beginning of the Arab Spring, for example, but right now is not enough. People can just write and talk on the social media just for relief, but not for a change. And even if they started to be mobilizing and attracting others to join, they were put in prison immediately. So I'm very sorry that I cannot inspire others. I cannot provide solutions, rather sharing questions. But I really feel that we are in a position that we need to find methods, and maybe we learn from the history a little bit how change happened before, because it's a changing world, but we are back to the same point. Peaceful movement, mobilization, starting from street is not always making a change right now because the tools are very different. We can be peaceful in the street, but we will be faced with weapons.
Thank you, Hanni. That's a you're leaving us with a very, very deep question. I don't know where we go with that, but you said going back to the beginning, to many things that we were taking for granted. Now we have to go back to see we don't have that freedom, that space. Yeah. Thank you. Now I will call upon Paul. Paul, your 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Meena. I think these conversations are very important. I'm only responding, or rather raising a question that I myself have put in the chat, which is, I think World Social Forum has not deliberately attempted to ignore, but the end product is we don't have much of racial minorities or identity groups who are making use of this space. And I'm wondering why, because I think it's important that the movement looks at some of these. Is it that we have not, I mean, as identity-based movement, some of them, we have not had the resources to participate or the time and the energy to do this, or there has not been, I don't think there are any conscious barriers, but probably there is no conscious efforts either. So this is something that both sides, I think, as whoever is the body which is looking to encourage participation or open this up, will have to look at it. And probably we also need to look at the communities or movements of these identity-based movements to see what is the gain and how they can use. I mean, there's definitely a lot of positive impact of this, but how do we make this happen to ensure that we also look at the other movements and then be strengthened by them? But this needs to be a very conscious process, and I don't think it will come just by itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Maybe what we should do is to try and see whether we can create a space particularly on this, and maybe you should try, and because we wanted to get in touch with Black Lives Matter, some of us were thinking that we should do this, but we were not able to. I mean, we spoke to some people in the US, but clearly we don't know people. These are all new movements. We don't know people who know them. So even the activists there were not able to contact them. So it would be good if we can actually build some kind of bridges between movements like these, so that there can be exchange of experiences, like the struggle of the Dalits, the struggle of the Black Lives Matter. I think there's so much commonality. Anyway, so over to you, Monica. Monica?
I wanted to refer to the political issues. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that there's this kind of disappointment about about the political system. So we don't see, it seems like it's not longer responding to our to the social movement demands. Entonces, creo que hay como un desencantamiento en la relación de los movimientos sociales con el sistema político, porque ya no responde a las demandas de los movimientos sociales. So one of the main issues that we should take into account is that the civic space for civil society organizations is shrinking quickly and progressively in all countries and all regions. Un tema que tenemos que tomar en cuenta es la reducción del espacio civil, del espacio cívico para el funcionamiento de las organizaciones sociales y los movimientos sociales. Democracy then, it's a kind of, it's under attack, and especially the fundamental freedoms and also human rights. And of course, we cannot avoid to mention that human rights defenders, especially women's human rights defenders and environmental human rights defenders, are under attack in all regions and all countries. No podemos dejar entonces de mencionar que se está reduciendo el espacio cívico y que la democracia está bajo ataque, especialmente las libertades fundamentales como la de expresión, opinión, asociación, pero también los derechos de las mujeres y los defensores y las defensoras de los derechos de las mujeres y los derechos ambientales. And of course, in this context, we need to mention that there's a linkage between the capital power, the political power, and of course the fundamentalism's forces that are attacking some progressive movements such the feminist movement or the TLGB movement. Y por supuesto, no podemos dejar de mencionar los ataques fundamentalistas y la relación entre el poder del capital en el mundo y los poderes políticos y las relaciones que se producen entre estos poderes. Entonces, the feminist movement have been pushing trying to push to get awareness about this relationship and these linkages between the capital, the political power, and the fundamentalist power also. Los movimientos feministas han estado tratando de visibilizar con más fuerza esta relación que existe entre las fuerzas conservadoras fundamentalistas, el poder del capital y el poder político, que creo que no debemos dejar de mencionar. Entonces, this is the context in which we need to assure that we can have a stronger and more sustainable alliances between the social movements. Este es el contexto en el que tenemos que plantearnos las alianzas entre los movimientos sociales para que estas alianzas sean más sostenibles, más fuertes y más sostenidas en el tiempo. Y esta es this World Social Forum. This is the space in which we can build bridges between the movements and try to consolidate this and strengthen these alliances. Y el Foro Social Mundial es el espacio en el que podemos consolidar estas alianzas más fuertes y más sostenibles. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Monica, and thank you for doing this in 2 languages. I don't know what the technical difficulty was. Anyway, but I want to thank the interpreters. They have been wonderful, very patient, and they've done a terrific job. We are very, very grateful to you. We hope that you will stay with us for our future events. And thank you very much to the speakers, those who are still there with us. We see this as a continuing dialogue. We are not going to stop with this. And most of the speakers whom we have had in our discussions, we hope to bring them back to continue the debate. This is something we want to build a body of knowledge on these issues. And we hope that we will be able to do that as Forum Connect. One of the things that came up today was also the need for more discussion and more understanding on how to build these solidarities in a changed world. And that really comes to the point that it's not just to get into action anymore, because everybody is in action at some level in the various countries and the various sectors they are in. But how do we build a solidarity? Is there do people see a point in solidarity? Do people see what kind of solidarity can help them? And the second question, what are the various new spaces, as Hanni raised? What are the new spaces that we need to create? Maybe the old spaces aren't working. Maybe we need to create more spaces. What are those spaces? Let's think outside of that. And what Christophe said about new kinds of organization, new structures, new priorities, more complex ways of seeing things. I think these are all very important issues that have come up today. I hope we will be able to put this back. Or am I speaking too fast? Probably am. So let us meet again and carry on this discussion. Now I'd like to ask Mike, whether he would like to say something, or any of the others from Forum Connect who would like to say something.
Yes, yes, I would like to say something.
Pierre, please go ahead.
No, I would like to say that this interesting discussion is also gives some echoes to the attempt to introduce a new format of participation in the social forum for this edition of the Virtual Social Forum, which is next to activities that are moments of dialogue and preparing dialogue. Doesn't mean any, there can be dialogue with action afterwards or without. There is another format of participation, which is initiative, which is specifically focused on action, and whatever type of action, like you said, building a solidarity space is an action. It's something that's public, something that has kind of, that can have an action plan and some visible points in this action plan that can be organized as action dates, publicly called, and where the participants in individual or organization can join and participate. And so this makes the forum projected towards the rest of the days, because the forum so far is an event, and then it can project, these initiatives can project actions in the future. That's why it's called Agora of the Futures. The futures in plural, because this is a diversity of action lines that movements in various type of articulation can build. So it's a formal attempt to give some visibility to the effort to answer the very deep questions that have been raised in this webinar about what type of spaces, what type of solidarity, what type of organizing for massive action, etc. So it's just, I just wanted to outline this. So now when you go to the forum, you just don't have only to announce, prepare activities, but you also propose to formulate initiatives for action for another possible world.
Thank you, Pierre. And I just wanted to again remind everybody that this is one of a series. So we are going to do more series on the same subject, just to, so we will be back. Yeah. Mike?
Thanks, Meena, and thanks for moderating today. Talking as an activist within the International Alliance of Inhabitants, there is a big disjuncture between the grassroots struggle of our daily lives and activism for a better world and the international platform for any number of reasons. It's like the continuum is big at both ends. It's the middle that's missing. I think a lot of the regionalism, the local internationalism, these are areas where I think we can really develop solidarity. As Pierre said, in the International Alliance of Inhabitants, we will have an initiative, which is the World Assemblies of Inhabitants. And this is a gathering place that will happen every 2 to 3 months throughout the year for activists that are aligned to the Alliance and others. It's not a partisan thing. So on Saturday this week, we have the 4th Virtual World Alliance of Inhabitants, and where people can discuss very similar issues, all about trying to develop the sense of internationalism, both at the rhetorical summit level, but also substantively at the regional and national levels. These are areas that where the work really takes place. So in that spirit, I appeal for continuing internationalism. Let us not be siloed in our little boxes called Zimbabwe or Madagascar or whatever. We are global citizens. We are part of a global movement. We act globally.
Thank you, Mike.
And finally, a big thank you to the interpreters. It's been a bit of a muddle today, but I hope people have enjoyed the services of our interpreters. They're a fantastic crowd who are really committed.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Okay, see you all soon. Bye-bye.